Understanding the current paradigm is quite important. If not, you're going to use all the wrong tools to prepare for whatever is coming. So the paradigm, you have to understand that everything is cyclical. Everything is cyclical because we tend to repeat similar experiences as our forefathers did. Then we teach certain things, and then the environment changes, so the next generation picks up things, and so on and so forth. You know, the age-old, bad times create strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and so on. Is really accurate. I do believe the cycles are bigger, and bigger cycles contain multiple smaller cycles. But what I want to talk about is that time and time again in history, we come to sort of an empire failing, usually around that period, but also like just things being shaken up, right? It doesn't have to be a huge cycle. Every now and then one ruler goes crazy and starts fearing that the fact that he's going to lose power so much that he feels the need to destroy all of the youth, especially the young men, the young boys. And that is a fear of him, because at some point in his life, or at some point in the bigger picture, he took over by stealing power, right? And whatever you stole, you have to give back. It's just karmical law, right? One way or another, right? And there's ways around that law, of course, but as long as you can feel and believe that you have stolen something and not giving back anything for it, then you will have to lose it, right? And just times like these were just even biblical times, like Herod, who killed the babies because he feared the coming of the person who will change history, right? And indeed he did. But also when you go back to Roman times or any times, there's always one push from top to bottom to emasculate, to kill, and to get rid of young men, right? And this is described also in the mythology, the Greek mythology of Kronos. I guess Latin is for Saturn, because the way he gains power is in the olden mythology, right? In the olden mythology, Kronos is actually a young man who is seeing his father, I guess Uranus, always coming down, the sky god coming down and quote unquote raping Earth, Gaia, right? And of course, it always have to be someone that you have to save, right? Usually your mother or a female or some female energy that you want to protect, right? And that in your head gives you the righteousness to kill your father figure. In these cases, it's the age-old good son, good father, or bad father, bad son dialect, I guess you could say it. And anyway, so Cronus, of course, castrates Uranus and he gains power. But then in himself, now as he turns to be sort of the leader of the gods, the supreme being, I guess, and wants to bring in the golden age, and depending on opinions, he does to some degree, right? What is he afraid of? Well, he's afraid of his own children, his own sons especially, that they will do unto him as he did to his father, right? And what does he do? Well, he eats his own babies, right? The god who eats his own babies, right? Because he knows that forcefully power will be taken away from him. So he has no excuse. He has to kill all of his children, each and one of them. Of course, we know the story that Zeus escapes. Again, with who? Because of the mother. So it's many times the mother betraying the bad father and conspiring with the son in order to bring in the new change, right? So what does he have to do? What does a bad father, a bad ruler have to do? Right? He has to kill all the babies in this mythology and make sure that his wife does not conspire against him. So what he needs to do is make sure that that he turns the females against the young males. The old teachers, the old female teachers against the young boys in school, the mothers against the son, the mothers against the father, and so on and so forth, so he can stay in power. And of course, this is an impotent power, because at some point it just becomes this clinging on to the old rule. You're making sure that things stay the same. And for that, you have to constantly bring in new fake challenges, new fake realities, right? And you have to deceive. And if you think about this, this is a fight between the archetypes, right? The father archetype, the son, and the mother, which are the three basic archetypes present in each and every culture going back as long as time. And then there are derived or other primal archetypes like the king, the sage, the jester, so on and so forth, which are also present in each and every society. However, the values associated to these may vary slightly, culture per culture, slightly. However, the major ones, the father, the son, and the mother, are almost always the same. So, do you now understand why the sickle of Kronos, right? The scythe, the sickle of Saturn, slicing or cutting the hammer, is the symbolism for communism. The son thinking that the father is not a righteous ruler, especially on top of the female energy, so he rebels and then by force takes away the power from the father, right? But not wanting to become the father, he's stuck in this continuous rebellious mode of the child mentality. Thus, he can never be truly raised to the ruler caste, but he always has to have this continuous rebellion, because he's also afraid of becoming his own father, but he's also afraid of his sons taking power away from him, like he did. So what happens in this time, right, that once the son becomes sort of the ruler of the realm, usually it splits into two. Part of it wants to become the father so he can rule truly, and part of it becomes a continuous rebel. And therein lies the division between the two, I guess, major factions of communism, Stalinism and Trotskyism. Stalinism is becoming the father, right? Effectively becoming the new Tsar and ruling almost very similarly the way the Tsar did, right? Embracing that you cannot rule in the son's archetype. The son's archetype is to bring in change, bring in anarchy, bring in chaos, to challenge the father. And rightly so, right? But that could be a constructive challenge or a destructive challenge. And if it's filled with hate and emotion, it's always going to be a destructive challenge, right? A destructive change. And the other part is, of course, is Trotskyism, which is the continuous rebellion, the never-ending rebellion. You always have to become rebellious, never escaping the son archetype. The bad son archetype and the bad father archetype are pushed together in this case. Now, of course, what is the, object, and want to say truly object of the eternal conflict between these two archetypes is the mother, right? As Kronos used the mother as the excuse why he needs to take away his father's power, so does you know, the mother in the other case, in the case of Zeus, who hides Zeus against his own father. So the kind of projected, the outward projected object of the goal is to always to save the mother, to save the mother. And what happens? They always just use the mother for excuses. So never fully or truly embracing femininity is just creating this fake feminine pose, I guess, kind of the object of the fight between each other. So that's the bad father, the bad son, and the bad mother archetype, right? So you bring in, you know, women liberation, but what you do is actually turn them into men. You bring in, you know, feminization, but what you do is actually take away the true, honest feminine features and you put it into mascara that anyone can put on now, and quote unquote they become female. It's like playing a joke on femininity in the name of saving it, right? So as a female, if you're listening, that's what you have to do. You know, you have to realize that no one out here is to save you, you know. So whoever promises savior, or whoever promises that's going to save you, is actually just using you as an object of their desire that they can go through to gain power. It's very important to understand that if you're listening as a female. No, you have to be choosing wisely. You have to choose sides sometimes, but you have to choose wisely based on your instincts and not promises. It's almost like whoever, I always say this, mute the person. If you're listening on YouTube, if you're listening on anywhere, you know, try to mute it, because voice can be manipulated. Sounds can be manipulated. I can say the nicest things, right? It's easy to fake. Always listen or see the actions, and more importantly, see the consequences of their actions. So as a female, if you mute a video, you can pick up on the minute details of how somebody is behaving, how their lips move, how their eyes move. And you can see most of the times if they are trying to deceive you. Back to the archetypal conflict. So what is a solution, right? Instead of this ever repeating death spiral of, I guess you could say, civilizations, but sometimes the cycle is much shorter between families or within a family, right? Well, it starts with the father, of course. The father being a strong father, not a weak father, being a strong role model for the son, right? That way the son can relate to his father, trying to learn from him instead of trying to challenge him for non-reasons, right? The son needs to bring in change. However, it needs to bring in change in according to his father. So where do we see that? Who talks about his father a lot? We know he is the son, and he praises his father, right? As the creator of all things, Jesus Christ. Of course, so now we come to a good father, good son, and a good mother archetype, where they all work together, right? Jesus is rebellious, right, against the Pharisees. He does bring in the new, no question. He does put away with old rules. He does bring in new rules for this world in the name of his father, right? So that is why the bad father, bad mother, bad son archetype type change that is being pushed in a loop all again and again. And we're not talking just about communism. You can go back to ancient civilizations, you will find this same loop playing over and over and over again. So how do you break it, right? Becoming a strong father is the most important thing, because usually that is what brings in this endless loop, right? So as a father, it starts with you. It starts with you being a strong role model that your children can look up to. If you want to get out of this loop, that's where it starts, you know? So any prepping, anything that you do, you have to make sure that it is it is through the lens of a strong father, strong family, a big family bond, you know, where everyone plays his or her role in the right way and not this power struggle, right? And from this comes love. From this self-respect comes love towards others, right? And then you can truly serve others and not use others as sort of this little tool to step ahead in power, right? So that is why many times communists or Pharisees or whoever, Herod, you name it, they are constantly afraid of the sun, because they know that change can only be brought through from the perspective from the sun archetype. So that is why they have to fight tooth and nail, and they always lose. They always lose, right? They have to use trickery and treachery, right? Eventually, right? And going back to the Greek mythology, Zeus does escape, right? So he is hidden by his mother, right? And raised in secret to the point where he can take over. And he defeats Kronos, right? The problem with this, that Kronos' trap, right? The one-eyed god with memory wants to push non-memory and non-wisdom on his own son. So Zeus, in order to fight Zeus, he needs to trick him into this, I guess, fleshy prison, where Zeus is mostly interested in women, in Olympic Games, in being a hero, trying to do things, right? So that is the lens you have to see to whenever they're pushing, you know, games, in the sense of even sports, like mass sports events, and you watching them from a chair in your living room, right? Sports are very important if you play them, if you do something physically. If not, it's entertainment. It's not sport. Don't call it sport. It's entertainment, right? The weakness of Zeus is entertainment, right? Women, entertainment, and so on and so forth. So depending on the story, how it goes, you know, there are pictures, of course, Zeus castrating Kronos, but also Zeus never really fully taking over, because he is stuck in this loop of distraction, right? So non-distracted son who wants to bring in change will bring in changes. There's nothing that they can stop it, you know? Christianity only really took off once the Christ died and then came back, right? So you have to think along these archetypes. You have to understand why things are happening, and then maybe opt out. If not, there's no saving. It's just, even if it's quote unquote change, they call it revolution for a reason. It just revolves. You become the father that now you have to be afraid of your son. If you want to stop this, you focus on raising the right children with the right morality, and you perfecting your own self to become a good role model for everyone else. Not forcing change on them like Uranus, not forcing change on them like Kronos. No, you becoming a role model that your neighbor wants to know. Why are you always happy? Why do you spend so much? How do you spend so much time with your kids? Being a role model that people come and follow, right? So that I think is quite important to understand. If not, no matter what you do, the best thing you can achieve is just make another revolution for someone else to come and rebel against a few years later. Thank you.